What is happening, people? It is your favorite uncle, Uncle Nick here, and as promised, the keg video. Now this is gonna be a two-part video. One part is gonna be the load, because the pick will transition into the clean and press, and the second part, like I just said, will be the clean and press. And there are a few ways to do both the load and the clean and press, which is why it's gonna be a two-part video, because it would probably be like a 30-minute video if I did both of them together on the same one. We are gonna start with the load. Now, there are the normal ways to do it, and then there's the way that you saw me do it for East Coast, which is definitely a lot more unorthodox, and it implements sort of a stone load movement. I'm vertically challenged at like 5'9" or 5'10", and I had to come up with something to contest with the guys that were like 6'2" in my weight class. And it's always a good day when you get to think outside the box and come up with a new way to load or move and implement, because it's always fun being able to get innovative. So without further ado, let's get right into this loading. The first part of the load is going to be the pick. You can stagger start, which is one hand away from you on the bottom. You're gonna kind of pitch the keg away from you at like a 45-degree angle, and your other hand should be directly between your heels. Basically, all you're gonna do is you're gonna row with that bottom hand towards your hips, and then you're gonna crush that keg. The other way to do it is to start the keg horizontally, lying on its side on the ground, and pick it up from the top side of the keg and row it into you, slide it up your knees, and then reach and grab around the far side of the keg. Now that's really the main two ways to pick up a keg, so there's not much further information on that will be any use to you. You're gonna breathe and brace just like you would on every other lift, and you're gonna row the keg to your body on both of them. They're just slightly different ways to pick the keg. Moving on to part two, which will be coming up with the keg before you load it. Now this gets a little more technical and involves a lot more hips and a lot of crush strength, because the keg will wanna roll out from underneath of you. I'm gonna go with the first two traditional ways before I get into the way I did for East Coast. The first traditional way, which will be crushing the keg, getting all the way around it. Now this works good for most people because normally you have the arm length, but for you shorter, or even for you women out there that are a little bit lacking in the arm length department, there is another way that I have for you to load the keg, and it is similar to the way you would clean it. First way, the most traditional way I see to load this keg, is once you have it in your lap after you've picked it, you're gonna take both your arms and bear hug this thing around the front. Now you wanna get a little bit lower, you don't wanna get just center, because the keg will slide out. It's a round cylinder, it's gonna roll. That's what round things do, they roll. Right? So, you've now reached all the way around this keg. You are trying to break that keg, bend that keg around your body. You're gonna take your hips, you're gonna come up with your hips just like you would with a stone. Then you're gonna drive your hips from point A to point B, all the way through. That is gonna launch the keg up your body, and you're gonna rip up on the keg to roll it up your chest. It should come up just on the bottom of your chest, in your collarbone region, somewhere around there. Then you are gonna dunk this keg over the bar. Now that is probably the most frequent way I see the keg loaded. But for some of you shorter guys, that's not always the case, AKA me. Unless it's for reps, which a standard height for loading is 52 inches, I'm fine there. I'll load it that way because it is faster. But if it is a little bit higher than that, I will load it like I'm going to clean it. The second way to load the keg, and that is going to be rolling it up your body. You're gonna pick it either way, but when you get to the lap position, you're gonna create a mirroring effect with your hands. Instead of going around it, you're gonna put one hand where it normally would be if you were crushing it. Then you're gonna put the other hand mirroring on top. And you're gonna kinda slide them 90 degrees to where they're mirroring. One's directly on the bottom, one's directly on the top. You're going to do the same hip motion. You're gonna rip those hips, but what you're gonna do different is rip both hands. The top hand is gonna rip back to you, the front hand is gonna rip the keg up your body. When you get the keg there, as you're ripping it up, you need to follow through with your hips and continue ripping, because the keg is gonna fold up on top of your chest. And one hand is gonna be high, one hand is gonna be low. They're literally gonna flip-flop by the keg rolling 180 degrees. That's a little more technical. Now everybody's hand placement is gonna be slightly different, but generally the same. You have to figure out what works for you. That's the beauty of strongman, is there's no written in stone way to do most of these lifts. You have to find your sweet spot for just about everything you do, because they're not barbells, they're not perfectly balanced. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable with new implements all the time. AKA embracing the suck, because it sucks when you get a new implement, it's not balanced, you have to refigure it out. Everything changes. After you come up with that keg, you're gonna get triple extension. Now this is gonna be consistent with any sort of loading regardless, which means your hips are through, you're kind of on your toes, you're getting every inch out of this load that you can to get it as high as you can. It takes practice, but becoming efficient, just like in powerlifting or especially in Olympic lifting, you want the efficiency. The efficiency is key. Smooth is fast. So your movements are a lot more precise and your input to power are timed properly. You don't want to, especially for a rep and time, you don't want to output more power than necessary. But the triple extension you'll see with a lot of cleans, a lot of presses, split jerks, that's where they get to their toes, their hips, their knees. It triple extends all the way, kind of getting the most height out of your extension as possible. Now that the first two are out of the way, we're gonna go on to a little more technical, unorthodox way that I had come up with. I don't know, someone else may have done it out there, but I haven't seen it. If that's the case, I'm sorry, I accidentally stole your movement. But if not, I'm going with I came up with it because I haven't seen anybody else do it. I'm sure it's not patented. I don't know of anybody patenting or copywriting a movement. I don't even have a name for this type of load yet. So if you get any ideas, drop some of those names for this type of load in the comment section below, and we'll see what you guys come up with. How about that? My unconventional abortion of a lift is more technical than the other two because it has a little more steps, but it gets the keg to your shoulder versus to your chest. So that's 3 inches, and it made a difference. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna pick the keg like you normally would. Now, I would pick this the first way I described to do the pick. It's vertical, tilted away from your 45-degree angle, top hand's far, bottom hand is close between your heels. Now you're gonna stand up with the keg. You're gonna roll it into you, but instead of lapping it horizontally, which would be parallel with the floor, you're gonna lap it and twist it vertically. So it's now sitting vertically. Depending on what handed you are, I am right-handed. So I reach around the keg with my right hand and grab the lip on the bottom. I take my left hand and grab the face of the keg like I'm crushing a stone. Then what I'm gonna do is the same hip motion. You're almost gonna front squat it up at this point. And I'm gonna use my hips to bump it up my body and get it to my stomach where it eventually scoots up my body to my shoulder, and then I'm going to set the keg over the bar. It all has to be controlled. You cannot give an inch here. You give an inch, the keg will take 3. And you do not want to do more work. I worked on this for 2 months before it became routine, and I was very confident in my ability to do this. So if it is something you're interested in doing, take the time to practice it before you walk out to a comp floor, because it does feel weird. The way you lap it with significant weight does kind of hurt your legs, but it's part of the game. No, there's not a lot of cleans that are exactly comfortable in strongman. I know the log isn't, and the continental clean sure is not comfortable. Probably the worst one. Enough complaining. You'll see as you get the keg to your stomach, you gotta continue crushing with that front hand and continue pulling up with that bottom hand. If you bring your hips too far back, the keg will actually want to fall away from you, and you do not want to let that happen. That is what that crush hand is for. Depending on which shoulder you want to go to, like I said, I'm right-handed, so we're going to use right-handedness as the example. So you move your head away, which would be to my left side, so the keg can clear onto my right shoulder. And I'm going to keep following through until that keg is on my shoulder. Once I get it up there, I get both hands underneath the keg, because then depending on how the keg is balanced will mitigate how much of the keg is out in front of you. If it's bottom loaded, you're going to want to get that keg a little bit farther back on your shoulder so it doesn't sink down. You can get the bottom end of that keg up. If it's more top heavy, you're not going to want to get it as far because it's going to want to tilt back. You do not want to lose it. Now, breathing and bracing is very weird here. You're constantly working. Once you get it here, you're kind of supported. It's uncomfortable, but you are supported. I would suggest chalking up, especially if you're sweaty, because you're gonna inch by inch. Every time you go to input power, hold whatever brace you have and go. Once you get it here to your shoulder, the hardest part is done. Now it is time to load it, and you're basically just gonna take a step forward and dump it over the bar. But before you dump it, I would suggest re-bracing, because it's a lot easier to breathe when it's on your shoulder than on your stomach. Now, as far as kegs go, some competitions allow you to use gloves. You're always going to be able to use a belt. For medleys, I don't suggest using a belt. I do not like using a belt because I feel it restricts my ability to move faster. And the weights typically aren't heavy enough that it really forces me to struggle with my brace. So if you're allowed to use gloves, I would recommend receiver gloves with the really sticky stuff, or there's like rubber work gloves. It's like the hard, thick rubber. These guys, they're called Mad Grip. This is by far the favorite thing I've used. I will also wear my lifting shoes, like my squat shoes. Take every inch I can get, people. Take that for what it's worth. And it provides a stable platform for you to stand on. Not only are they flat, but they do give you a little bit of height. Some people use construction boots because they have the big heel on them, but I don't like the instability that comes with them. My squat shoes, I'm comfortable in. They give me a little stability, give me like an inch or so. So that's what I do this with regularly, even when I practice. I do wear my knee and elbow sleeves. I bring my elbow sleeves up a little bit higher because when you do keg work, this will get bruised. I promise you. If you've never done this before, your biceps will be all sorts of bruised up. And it's a pretty frequent thing. It actually happened at East Coast. A guy completely tore his bicep on the keg load. So get that compression on, protect your biceps, use your upper back to crush that keg as much as you can. But like I said, that sleeve I bring up to about here because I'm not worried about the pressing. I'm worried about protecting my bicep, giving it a little bit of padding because that keg will dig in right here. Other than that, that's about the only equipment I use outside of chalk. Everyone's got chalk, I hope. That really covers the loading part. The clean and press video will be a little bit more extensive because it is a bigger movement. It isn't just loading. You have to figure out the timing of everything because there are one motions, there's like a two-part movement. There are a couple ways to do it. I have about 3 different methods and I've tried all 3. That will be the next video in this keg how-to thing I got going on here because that is what you guys wanted to see. So thanks for watching this. I really hope you guys got something out of this. Comment below. Until the next time, guys, you know what the deal is. Get out there, get after it, and embrace the suck.